This is my February 2022 rig update and comments, questions, and answers and changes. So thought I'd shake things up a little bit. I'm going to start with one of the comments that I got that said, you should speak even if your English isn't good. Didn't know how to take that, but suffice it to say I've been speaking English for just a few years. Got another comment that said, just buy a motion platform. And I understand your heart was in the right place. I'm going to explain a little bit behind some of the decisions on this rig, just so it might make sense to you. You can see the rig sitting here in the corner of my media room. Okay? It does not have a dedicated space. This is also my exercise room. I have a full hoist weight system in here, a Kaiser spin bike, an elliptical trainer, a Concept 2 rowing machine, etc. So this is a multi-purpose room, and I don't have dedicated space to set up a motion platform. I have looked at what's involved. Even if I were to say put a D-box system on here or something to that effect, it would take up just enough additional room and be just hard enough that to move it that I don't think I would use it. So for the time being, I'm staying with what I've got. And let me just explain a little bit about this. With the tactile system I've got here right now, it doesn't require a lot of motion. When you're on a track, between the butt kicker and the TST under the seat, and the same on the back, under the foot plate, and on the back of the seat, there's a whole lot of instantaneous information coming through. And my NLR V3 motion system on tracks is barely moving. If I hit a curb, it'll kick me. When I'm going around corners, it does turn. I've got most of the fore-aft surge turned off. I'm relying on the G-belt system to pull on my seat belts to give me a good idea if I'm how hard I'm decelerating, and also how hard I'm cornering. And the combination of the tactile and the G-forces and a little bit of motion gives me a pretty good idea of how planted I am. So I'm going to stick with this existing setup for a while now, but thanks for all your thoughts. I'm going to start with a few of the updates I've made. So this aluminum plate has been through a lot. At one point I had some auras mounted under it, and then I put a single TST on it. Then I tried to figure out how I could possibly fit a BK, a butt kicker concert in that space, given I had flight pedals underneath it, and my SE2 Pro power supplies, outlets, a lot of wiring and so forth under there. So I couldn't just hang everything straight down. So I came up with a staggered approach. And the thought that I had was, I seem to be losing something, and what I'm thinking it was the small bolt surfaces. I've got 3 M5 bolts and 3 more M6 bolts in the back here, and I think the 1/8 inch aluminum tubing was basically flexing, and I was losing a lot of the power out of the BK. So I went to a welded steel approach. I recently joined a makerspace here in Knoxville, Knox Makers, and they have a lot of facilities, so I've learned how to weld. And the foot plate back here is welded. I'll include some pictures in the video of that and the process. I also upgraded the TST in the front from the 329 you see here, the gold, to the platinum 429. The TST 429s are more powerful. They're twice as efficient. So I actually had to turn my amplifier back when I put that under there, and they've got a little better lower end, and I kind of like it. I may end up reusing this in a vertical mount on the other side of the seat where I had it for a little while when I was playing earlier. I'm not sure about that. I get a lot of questions about my inverted pedals and the sliding plate. And in the videos I've had before, you see the quick releases being popped down and sliding back and forth. And I'll include some diagrams of this for those who are interested, sources for that, and a little bit about the plates. I haven't created any drawings of the plates. That was before I got into 3D printing, so I just measured, punched the holes, or started them, drilled them, and everything fit. So I'll try to create something so other people could possibly do that. All right, this is something that came up recently. I've referred to my tactile system and had someone saying they couldn't find race base anywhere. There's a company called SimTag that is currently selling the race base isolation, and this includes, there's also a seat plate that will fit under most seat brackets and sliding systems and so forth, or it should handle just about any of that. They have brackets and they have isolation. So you might notice the little vinyl work on the side there. The Makerspace also has they have a couple vinyl cutters, and so I got to try that out recently, so put a little vinyl on there. One of the other little things I just recently did was I got a remote switch. It's a 15 amp switched power, and the reason I did that is I run in VR exclusively, and I've got base stations in the corners of the room. And when I power things up, I've got a switch that I've been bending over on the floor and switching manually. That would power up the, I've got the 2 amplifiers, there's 2 DSPs, the computer, the base station, all that stuff was connected together, the auxiliary power supply for the headset, etc. So now I can just press a button and that goes on, press another one, that goes on, and I'm ready to go. So I thought that was kind of cute. Just a little thing. And I thought I'd cover a couple other little things. This is something that I hadn't really shown much. It's just a simple tripod stand with a VR lanyard on the side of it. And I just propped this up next to my rig, and it keeps the cable off of me, so it's not brushing on my shoulder, which can be irritating if you're riding around for a while. So this really helps. These things tend to come in 6-packs because they assume that you're going to mount them to the ceiling, but you just put the cable in and it's got a little rubber clasp, and that takes care of that. Let's see. What are my controls? And some of this was flight related as well. So right now I'm running an SE2 Pro. I've got a Precision Sim Engineering GT3 wheel. I've got a Real Momo 330 millimeter rally wheel. Hussingfeld Sprint pedals with the HRS pedal faces. Let's see, the ProSim H-pattern shifter, the Hussingfeld sequential shifter, and now their old style handbrake. The button box is something I made myself. I get questions about this periodically as well. Everything on my rig that's 3D printed, or just about everything, is available on Thingaverse under, I think it's Heli Rider or RC Heli Guy, one of those two. So like these little fairings, I've got a bunch of 3D printed things for, let's see, there's a 1 liter Camelback Cup Holder that I use with my hydration system, and that's another nice little thing. If you're in a race for a while, I've got the tank of water hanging off the back, so it's not moving with the seat, and they have an extension bite tube, and I've got a magnetic release on my harness, and then it's also clipped up a little higher, so I can just pull it off, get a drink, drop it back down, and keep on going, and I don't worry about spilling anything in VR because I can't see anything. Let's see. Since the video I created on the G belt, I've upgraded to the Crow Safety 6-point harnesses, and I like them a lot better. I've got them in a cross configuration where they go under each leg, which is, I was told that's an F1 thing. I like it better than having it come up through the center. It seems to work real well for me. And I'm real happy with these seat belts. They, because the anchors are detachable, it makes it easy to roll them up behind the G belt and not have a bunch of webbing and metal or anything dangling, or having to actually cut the belts and hurt them in any way. I've also had people ask me why they see my shoes in the seat like that. I have 3 cats. They're quite furry, and if any of you have small animals, dogs and cats, they seem to love these seats. If I put the shoes in there, the cats don't jump in there, and I don't have to remove piles of fur. So I keep that in there. The race-based thing is something I'm going to probably talk about a little bit more. The transducer setup is very compelling. The way things work right now, I've described best as a symphony. You've got the motion on here is basically just in the background. The tactile is you turn the engine on. I've got a little switch I tend to use here. You feel the engine come to life, and you rev the engine. You can hear it hitting the rev line. You feel it when you hit bumps, when you have rumble strips. The speed sensation is fantastic. You're driving down a straight, you're getting up to 150 miles an hour, and the sensation between the exciters and the rest of the transducers, you have the sensation that you're building up speed. It's really nice. The effect for sliding when you've got your wheel slip, that's a really nice effect too. The part that surprises me is I spend most of my time in iRacing, and from what I can tell, the signal isn't actually split, but up here, when I feel it, I know which end is sliding, and in my head, I'm thinking that the rear end is sliding. It's surprising how your brain will connect the dots. The combination of the force feedback, a little bit of motion, the tactile, it all works together real well. And then the seat belts with the G-force, right now it feels like all of them are working together very, very unified in a way that it is incredibly immersive. And one thing I have noticed with VR, and I understand why people use triples. If you're doing an endurance race and you get hot in a VR headset, if you've got kids running around, if you prefer to have ultra high resolution, which is hopefully just within a year away in VR, there are some reasons why that works. And then some people have nausea issues. But what I've found in VR is that it takes less motion for me to feel it, to trick my brain. It takes less tactile vibrations for me to feel. Having the headset with the headphones over my ears, well, not necessarily headphones. I'm using the valve index, so I've got the speakers just off my ears. But that tends to make it so you can't hear the actuators, transducers, motion. It's just, it fades away. You hear the audio track inside the sim, and everything else just feels that much more realistic. So I feel like this is a very, it's a very surprisingly immersive setup. And I'm not going to argue that the NLR V3 competes with a full chassis motion. It doesn't. But with the tactile, I'm getting the instantaneous feedback that I want when I'm in a rig. And from what I've seen, most of the professional racers don't like motion on their rigs because I guess it throws off. They're used to what the real world has, and it's hard to actually compete with that. In a VR situation, this appears to work pretty well. Let's see, what were the other things? All right, hang on one sec. Another question that I've gotten is what I'm using for flight controls, and I'm a fan of the Virpil equipment. I've got the quick release setup that I've shown in other videos, so I've got the Virpil throttle here for flight, and I 3D printed a mount for it, and I have ability to slide this forward and backwards, and I could raise and lower it, so it's dialed in pretty well. For the quick release stick, I'm also using a Virpil base and a Constellation grip. I really like this. I used to have the Thrustmaster Warthog, and the stick feels pretty good, but the Warthog stick it's metal, and frequently it feels very cold when I'm grabbing it, and the switches on this are much easier to work on. I felt like I was getting a real workout with the A10 Warthog. It has some pretty strong springs, but I think they're supposed to be realistic, but at some point the realism is, I can do with a little less, I think. And the other thing about the Virpil is it has a cam system and adjustable tension, which works really well. So you can handle extension pipes on it and it'll still hold well. But anyway, that's what I'm using with that, and then there's a bunch of 3D printed parts, and then this is part of the magnetic locking system I've got. So there's a piece of 1/4-inch steel here, and when this slides under the seat, it can lock into that. The collective stick I got, the irony is I got this in anticipation of the digital or DCS Apache helicopter last spring, and I was real excited about it. They said they were going to release it in June, and for those of you who follow DCS, their releases can sometimes, actually I think Eagle's creating this, but well, Eagle does create DCS. But anyway, this has been working fine. I've used it with the Huey, and I've got the Hind now, but I've already mentioned I like Virpil, and they now have a collective with interchangeable grips, and if I had to do it again, I'd probably go with the Virpil just because of the track record they have and how good the other controls are. This is working just fine. I'm not likely to replace it just yet. When the Apache finally does get released, and it was supposed to be January 22nd of 2022 recently, and now they're saying first quarter 2022, so I'm hoping it'll be soon. I guess I'll just have to see how this works in practice, and so it's possible I'll update this at some point, but for the time being I'll stick with it. But for the moment I'd recommend getting a Virpil, and even though they are back ordered, they're fantastic controls, a lot better than what I had with the Thrustmaster. In the case of the throttle, the difference is night and day. The A10 Warthog control feels very plasticky compared to this. This is very solid, and it just feels a lot better. So I like the feel of it much better. They've got a new version of this that has multiple detent settings on the side. This has detents that are configurable underneath, and I have room to get to them, so you can have your afterburners kick in after a certain point. The new ones have many settings on them. So there was this version, which was the one, then the second version they came out with didn't have the detents, and now the third version has the detents just set up beautifully. So I definitely go for the latest version if you're in the market for one of those throttles. Let's see. I'm trying to think if there's much of anything else. I will have some information on the pedals, and I'm feeling like I'm getting down to pretty nitpicky items on here. When I'm looking at remote controls to turn on the power strips, vinyl, it's getting there. So I'm not actually sure where this is going next. this weekend I'm going to the Knox Makers again, and I'm going to get trained on the Bridgeport mill, which will open up some additional things. So I'm sure I'll come up with things to do. I'm just not sure how many more upgrades I have on this. I do expect at some point I'm going to redesign the button box. It is working beautifully for me, holds my phone, my headset, the joysticks for the seat and for navigation inside games that don't have mouse support, like Dirt Rally 2. This works real well. I can get through the buttons. I've got my escape and enter and all that set up here. For my others, I've got the ignition switch, and the VR center button is up here for everything DCS included, so it's always there. So even if I don't have a steering wheel on, or I've got a steering wheel with no controls on it, I've got the same buttons that do similar things. And one thing that isn't obvious is that these labels are all held on with magnets. They're little 5 by 2 millimeter thick round magnets that I actually pounded into the back of the labels on here. And I've got the magnet standardized across the entire thing, so I can create any labels I want for anything. I could potentially have a setup for DCS that's completely different. Now, since I'm in VR all the time, you might wonder, why would I have labels? And the big issue, of course, is that I forget where things are, and so before I get in game, I'll look at it to remember where certain things are if I'm not using them frequently. The fan that I've got up here is not something that's it doesn't throw off a gale force wind, but it's perfect for the VR headset. I've got little vents in the front of the index, and it just keeps a little breeze going through, so I never have any fogging in my VR headset at all with it. It works really well. So you can kind of see over time I've iterated the design. I used to have a big metal plate that held my mouse, which is currently just sitting on a piece of 3D printed material that bolts into the other side of the dash here. And the metal piece was pretty, and I had people asking about it, but it would vibrate, and that doesn't. And I also adjusted the height and moved it around some. There are a lot of little tweaks that have happened over time, but it's feeling pretty well dialed in. So, I mean, if there's anything in particular that it would make sense for me to go in depth, feel free to ask in the comment section. I am going to do something to show how the race-based transducers work, so you can see video of the rig in operation and see how loud, actually how quiet the transducers run. It's surprising how much you get from them for how little you actually hear them. The NLR-V3 is fairly quiet by itself. The transducers are fairly quiet. The actuators on the G-belt aren't bad, but you sometimes pick up on them a little bit, but not enough that it really draws too much attention to it. So I've been pretty happy with the overall sound levels of this. My rig does sit in the basement of my home. It's not like I have neighbors underneath, so I can't tell you how any of this would sound if there were people under me. I'm using my rig on concrete, and I know I've heard people make comments about the H-pattern shifter, the ProSim, about how it clunks into gear and it makes noise that you might hear. Anyway, those aren't issues that I have to contend with. As far as cooling goes, I don't really have an issue with that either. This is the basement of my home. It's air conditioned. Right now it's winter, and I have the vents open to get as much heat down here as I can get because it gets a little bit cool. And during the summer, the cool air automatically comes down here. So it's usually a very cool environment. So I don't have any issues getting hot at all. So I've seen people who have the big blowers on their rigs, and it's just not needed for what I have here. And let me wrap up by saying these are personal expressions, and I've said this in many forums. Rigs are what you want them to be. There's not a right or wrong way to do it. There's whatever makes you happy. I mean, these are toys. I've had a lot of passion tied up in this and just figuring things out, and I enjoy the whole design process and building things. But at the end of the day, there's the journey that's fun, and whether you like what you get out. Does it put a grin on your face? When I drive this rig, I really enjoy how it feels. Okay, one more time since I ran out of memory. I just want to make one point very clear about all this. I'm sharing what's working for me. I am not trying to tell you that there is a right or wrong way. This is a toy. I like my toy. It reflects my priorities. If you've got an SFX 100 PT actuator or D-box system, I'm not throwing stones or saying that my NLR V3 is better. I'm just saying that with what I'm getting out of tactile, it's enough motion that I'm happy. And for things like Dirt Rally, it does a great job pitching you forward if you're landing off a jump in Finland or something. There are a few things it does really well, but this isn't my rig versus anyone else's rig. This is just, here's what I've done, what's worked for me. If any bits and pieces of what I've done work for you, great. So that's all.